What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another new episode of Life's a Bit with Larry Mullins. I appreciate the support and I appreciate you listening or watching, depending on how you're consuming this podcast. Do me a favor, if you happen to be watching on YouTube, take a few seconds and click the subscribe button. Like the video, leave a comment. Definitely click subscribe. It helps more than you know. If you're listening on Apple, make sure you leave a rating and write a review. Spotify, I think Spotify just has the follow button. Write a review if you can. If you're watching it, subscribe if you can. Today's guest is a comedian by the name of Joel Byars. An incredibly awesome guy, super down to earth, great comic. He's been in the scene for a little over a decade, and he's the host of a podcast called the Hot Breath Comedy Network. He's, how do I put this into words? He has crafted this network, this group of people that he loves to help comics. So his Hot Breath Comedy Network, there's just videos like joke writing classes and live stream interviews with other comedians. If you definitely are interested in starting stand-up comedy, definitely check out his podcast, check out his channel on YouTube. Do me a favor and you can follow him on all social media at Joel Byars Comedy. That's at JoelByars Comedy. And the same for his website, joelbyerscomedy.com. Look up the Hot Breath Comedy Network on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to that. This is a great guy. He gave me a lot of tips because it's honestly, that's something I've thought about pursuing in the future as well. Not going to lie. Doing this pod, interviewing other comedians, just interviewing comedians in general. I said other, like I'm a comic, but interviewing comedians, it's honestly, it's made me want to give it a try. Why not? Trying to make the best of this shit hand the planet Earth has dealt us. Anyways, really enjoyed my chat with Joel. He's just a super great guy. Without further ado, allow me to introduce Joel Byars.
Larry.
Oh, I see the infamous office, or wherever it is you do all your stuff from.
It's all here.
It's
There's
great.
The balloons up there. It's all happening.
You'll be number 14 for me.
Congrats, man. That's a big deal.
My cousin read some article went somewhere and he said, yeah, a lot of people on average stop after 7 for some reason. I'm like, that's a really odd number. Have you heard that before?
I heard it was something like 60 or 70% of people don't make it past like 10.
Well, I'm just like, I can thank the pandemic for wanting to do this. I've kind of always wanted to do it, but it's just this kind of, and then I was like,
a lot of work.
I'm like, man, who? At first I was like worried, like, is anybody going to say yes? And then nobody has said no yet.
Great.
Surprisingly. And I think some people just don't read their DMs. And then other people, I'm like, I'm not really sure how I should reach out to them.
Is that how you're reaching out to people normally? Is the DM?
Yeah.
Everyone's been on DMs?
Yeah.
Nice.
So I've just gotten lucky. I haven't got to the point where I have to email somebody's manager yet or something, because I haven't tried to go that big yet. I'd probably say the most popular comic I've had on is Mark Normand.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
And that's how I discovered you.
I was researching him.
Was just looking up random videos of him when I first got into him recently, and I watched the original interview you did in his hotel room.
Yeah.
And then the one over Zoom, and I was cracking up. But before I actually get into the actual stuff, so if you at the end, just keep in mind if you want to mention any dates or something, anything involving a date, when people are listening to this, the few people that are, it'll be December 11th when this is actually
cool
playing. And then well, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks for asking me, Larry.
your thing on YouTube, like the hot breath, is that like available like as audio only too, or is it just?
Yep, it's
Okay.
available audio only podcast. There's actually a lot more interviews on the podcast than YouTube.
Okay, in the YouTube, it's more so like the how would you call it, like tips and like help, like you got your joke writing things, like the live streams and like where did
And
you
it's the video version of full length interviews and then like educational clips and such. Yeah.
now how did you, because that just baffles me, like I'm like that's such a cool concept, like how did you think to come up with something to do something like that, like for that, because that could be incredibly helpful for somebody that legitimately wants to like pursue this.
Yeah, I mean that's why it started, because I started kind of creating the content I wish existed. As a comedian now over 10 years in the game, I've been doing the podcast a little over 5 years, and the podcast started with what kind of podcast do I wish existed? And it's like I would like Inside the Actor Studio if it were for comics, comics nerding out about the craft, and there wasn't really a podcast out there. Like all the comedy podcasts at that time were comedians trying to out funny each other. Basically, it was just like people hanging out a lot of the time. There wasn't one that was like well-researched interviews about the craft of comedy. And now 5.5 years later, it's grown into the YouTube platform and the Facebook group and the daily writing clubs and all of that. But it all started with, what is a podcast I wish existed? And now that's become basically the guiding light for everything I create is, well, as a comic, what do I wish existed? And it seems to be working.
That's awesome. Like I'm a nerd. Like I would actually watch Inside the Actor Studio just because I love watching stuff like that.
Yeah, me
I
too.
love watching interviews, and I love anything behind the scenes involving anything.
Yeah, me too.
Like even relating to comedy, like I wish I could do that stuff, I mean, I wish, and like I sat there one time and I tried to like write something. I was like, I can't do this. I'm like, I probably can if I work hard at it, but like,
well, how many times have you tried it?
Oh, I haven't tried. I've tried it 0 times.
Oh, well, then you definitely can't if you're not doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that's
either
everybody.
You can or can't. Either way, you're right, Larry.
Yeah, everybody I've asked said, well, the only way to know is to just try it. And I said, and I talked to somebody, I said, if I could come up with just 5 minutes of something decent, I may attempt it.
Yeah.
But I'd have to like come up with something and try it on my friends. Like, do you think this is funny? Before I even was brave enough to attempt it.
That's how it starts. Starting's the hardest part. Like writing a joke and then telling it to someone is the hardest part.
And then I just, then there's the whole
more excuses. Wow, you got a lot of you really rehearsed and researched your excuses to why you can't do it. How much have you put into actually doing it?
Oh no, and another somebody I talked to told me that focus on making this as good as it can be and then start focusing on that. Like, so just in my spare time, I've been like, if I have like an idea or something, I might jot a little something down and just like close the notebook. Mm-hmm. But like I'm putting work into this, like just it's not, I mean, it's easy, but it's not.
A podcast?
Yeah, like,
oh gosh, it's a like full-time job. People don't get that. Scheduling,
messaging, and I edit everything myself afterwards, and it's just like DIY,
Yeah, I feel you. I've been doing the same with Hot Breath for over 5 years now. I now have like an engineer I'll send the sound files to and all that, but I'm still researching the guests myself, still for the most part booking all the guests myself. I mean, it's editing the video, then you got to put out promo clips, and then you got to, show notes. Like these are all little things people don't realize. They think you just record audio and then it appears on the internet, but it's like, no, there's a lot of work that goes into a 30-minute podcast.
Yeah. Like when I started, I'm like, well, initially I didn't have the microphone, and then I bought the microphone. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, well, I want to do this. So I went out and I bought like a brand new MacBook, and then I got like a microphone. The next it'll be like, painting my room a certain way, getting some lights. But I mean, that's eventually what I want to get to,
Yeah, of course.
But it's, yeah. And then I'm learning. I started off in like basic stuff and like iMovie. Now I just got Final Cut Pro, and I'm like getting like trying to, you know, at least learning. It's still basically the same. It's just way more advanced. I'm learning.
Yeah. That's
know,
all. Learning, as long as you're learning, that's what's most important. Because mine started on borrowed equipment. You know, I didn't even have anything, just borrowed it from a friend, and he helped me out, and I was recording wherever I could, however I could, and just kind of bootstrapping it that way. So it's all a process, but it all comes down to consistency. So you having 14 episodes is more than most podcasters have created in their lives. So you're on the right track. It's just consistency. And then the quality from the cool fancy lights and maybe a better microphone or whatnot. I mean, yours sounds great, but I just mean it's all like a piece of a puzzle that'll all incrementally come in through consistency, but it all just happen. It doesn't happen if you don't start, and you started. So that's the hardest part.
Yeah. And just gradually, I'll just gradually upgrade, you know. If I was one of those people that was like made of money, I'd just like buy everything, but
right.
You know, that's not, yeah. It's funny you said like, I was coming up with excuses of why I can't do it or why and it's funny because I've always like growing up, I've always liked the bigger comics, and it's never something that I was like, man, I wish I could do that. I didn't start getting those thoughts until I started doing this and actually talking to comedians.
Yeah.
That are like and everybody I've talked to is more of like the mid to lower level. Mm-hmm. So they're putting in like way more work than like the huge guys are. And I respect that. And I was like, I'm learning stuff just by talking to everybody else. I'm like, I don't know, you know, and I'm watching clips on YouTube, listening to stuff. And I'm like, But I remember when I was doing the band thing in high school, I had crazy stage fright. And then I'm like, which takes me to the, you know, I don't know if I could do that. And then I'm like, oh, the whole heckling thing, which I know happens. And I saw that clip you put on Instagram recently with the heckler. And I literally laughed out loud. That was funny. Just like the kind I made afterwards, like, oh,
she's hammered.
So that lady was tore up.
Oh, she was so drunk. Yeah. She wasn't like, that's the thing with hecklers is like, part of handling a heckler is understanding the heckler. What type of heckle is it? You know, for the example of the lady you saw in my video, she was nice. She was just drunk. She thought she was helping. Like
just drunk and blurting out stuff.
A lot of hecklers are just drunk and think they're helping. So there's one way to handle that versus someone who's actually trying to ruin the show. So there's different types of hecklers, but once you can identify the type they are, then that's how you can start to have fun with them. But either way, when it comes to a heckler, it's scary for comics, but it helps the fear that the audience is on your side. Like the audience wants you to win. The audience wants that heckler to shut up. So they're going when you're handling that heckler. So you're not alone in dealing with a heckler. And it's important to remember that as you feel like, oh no, this one heckler is going to derail the show and everyone's going to hate me. It's more like, no, they all hate that heckler and they're glad that you're addressing it.
Yeah, that's I imagine like the audience would be like, they would be more mad, like not like, oh, this guy is getting heckled because he's bad. Like, no, like I'd be like, what the hell is this person doing?
Yep.
You know, if somebody's heckling, like, and then I would be all like, kind of like all giddy if the comic starts attacking the person, you know, talking shit or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm like, I view it as just very disrespectful if somebody's on stage doing something and then someone just starts rambling or talking out loud. Like, But what do I know?
It is very disrespectful, but a lot of people don't know that. And a lot of people don't intend to be disrespectful. It's like they're having fun, you know, and if you can have fun with the heckler and make a fun situation out of it, then the audience will have fun with it, you know. But what you saw in that video was also me 10 years into comedy, being able to politely address a heckler, have fun with it without it derailing the show. Like I've had plenty of experiences to where hecklers gotten the best of me, or I've bombed, or I've crumbled, or I've ruined shows. You know, that's all part of it. That's all part of learning the skill of comedy, and that craft is just, you learn a lot by doing, you know, I'm glad you're doing this show because you're giving a valuable resource for comics and comedy fans to learn about the craft. But a lot of it is like, you have to also go out and do it yourself. You know, I have workshops and online courses and whatnot, but the thing I say in all of those is these things only work if you do. This isn't going to be the class that gets you onto late night. If it is, here is your money back. These are only tools for you to use throughout your career. This isn't something that you're just going to watch this and be like, oh, I'm a comic now. No, now you go put them into action, get on stage. We were just doing a Q&A with Roy Wood Jr. before this, and he was saying that rinse and repeat. You write, get on stage, then you record it, then you go back, reference it, edit it down, and then rinse and repeat. You pretty much write, take it on stage, and then refine. Like, it's just that never-ending cycle to actually create material.
Oh, it's
so you should do it.
Yeah. I mean, like, kind of like even like one of my old friends, like back when I was in high school and like learning to instruments and stuff. He's like, well, you're not a band until you actually play a show. And that's what he would say, like, until you're actually doing it. Mm-hmm. He's like, if you're just sitting there like practicing in a room, he's like, you're not really a band. He's like, well, you are, but you're not.
You just don't know. Yeah, you don't know until you get on that stage. Like, you
and
can
now with the state of the world, like,
Zoom. I think Zoom shows are still good resources for people. I think you can still get good feedback on a Zoom show. I think you can still like write and refine your jokes by performing on Zoom shows. And it's what we have right now. So it's just using what you have to get better at comedy. And I think Zoom shows are a useful resource for comics to keep developing. There's a reason why there's comics that are like Jackie Cation is like, she's practicing her album on Zoom that she's going to then release. Steve Rogers, who you've had on here, we've had him. He's been like working through recording an album, and we've been doing a few interviews with him on Hot Breath, like tracking that process. And he's done Zoom shows where it's him working through the entire album, just getting the reps in. You know, it's all about just the repetition.
Oh, it's so fascinating. That's so fascinating. Because I've only actually attended one Zoom show, and I was like, this is interesting.
It is interesting.
You know, and I'm like, I don't know what to expect. I've like been on Zoom like once my entire life at the time. This was like back in August. And like, I just like, I bought the tickets and I clicked the link and I was like, okay, I see all the faces. And then like, I was the first one that was brave enough to unmute themselves because the host said, unmute yourself. I was like, all right, I want them to hear me laughing.
Right.
Like, I don't, you know, and there was like a bunch of people that just, you saw the little mute symbol. And I'm just like, you know, but there was a good amount that had him unmuted, but it was weird. It was just like this, except somebody just doing a whole set. And then here's some laughter. Then the next person comes on.
And it was weird at first, like the first few I did. And I was like, are these even worth it? But now, I mean, we do Zoom roasts, like in our Facebook group, we do showcases and feedback mics. Really using it as a tool. And it's just kind of making the most of the situation. So you can like complain about what you don't have. You're like, oh, where are the live shows? And this isn't comedy or whatever. It's like, just make the most of what we do have and maximize your development as a comedian. So when the stage comes back, you're hitting the ground running and not starting over like, wait, what do I do again? But it was weird, and it can still be weird just because it's so foreign in a lot of ways. But you still get the laughs and you still see the people smiling and you still get that real-time feedback. So I think it's important for comics to still do the Zoom shows, even if some others are like, oh, they're dumb. You know, I mean, you've had Mark Norman on here. Prime example. Mark Norman is doing Zoom shows. Okay. If Mark Norman isn't too good to do a Zoom show after he's done specials and been on every late night show under the moon, you know, open up for Seinfeld. If he's not, then what makes you think you are?
Yeah, like I'm like, okay, you know, starting out like that's something, at least that's something I'd be less afraid of, at least starting out, because it's in front of a computer screen.
Yep.
So, you know, nothing would be thrown at me, or, you know, because I've had, you know, growing up, like, I'm not like super funny. Like, I have some friends that are just like naturally funny. like pretty much everything out of their mouth. Like I'm laughing. Like people tell me I'm funny, but I've never like actually tried to like, I'm just like, how, and like half the time I'm answered by, oh, it's just, I'm just explaining something that actually happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like maybe putting like a small spin on it or something. And, or it's just literally how it's told.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's by that principle, it sounds easy. Like, I guess the concept of it sounds easy,
Mm-hmm.
and then I've heard, this became this much better just because I took two words out,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
little things. And I'm just like, it blows my mind because I used to think the same way about like music when I learned to play. And I don't know. I love the behind the scenes stuff. Like, I'm always like, how did you do this? How,
Whole show too. And that's everything I do is just, how did you do this? I think the first interview with Mark Norman we did several years ago. We've done 3 with him now, but I think the first one was just like, how did you book Conan? Like I was going through this whole mindset of like, I got to get on Conan. That's my Mount Olympus. That's my Everest. I'm going to, that's the sword I'm going to pull out of the stone is getting on Conan. And it's like, there at the end of the day, it's like there's no right way. There's really only your way. So one comic's path onto late night is not going to be the same as any other comics. I mean, even Steve Rogers, prime example, you would assume, oh, you need an agent, you need to be in somewhere, but it's like, oh, Steve was funny and the booker saw him and you should do late night. It's like, it can be that simple. You're funny and you're seen being funny and you get opportunities that way. But from interviewing over 300 comics, there is no one way to make it in this comedy game. That's the thing I've learned. But their number one piece of advice has been, you got to get on stage.
Just do it.
The number one, I'm telling you, over 300 interviews with comics, from Jeff Foxworthy, the Cedric the Entertainer, to Steven Rogers, you've got to get on stage. Period. That's how you getting on stage.
Oh, well, maybe one day, and then I'm like, am I too old to start something like this? And
oh man, this should be changed to excuses with Larry. That's what it should be. But there's honestly no, you're not alone in that. And most people, it took me until senior year of college to actually decide to try stand up. I wanted to do it my whole life. But I was about to graduate, and I was like, geez, what am I going to do? I have all this debt. I'm going to have to move back home, have nothing else to lose. Might as well try this thing called stand-up. So you're not alone in those feelings. And I think that's most of the people in our Facebook group that has over 200 people in it now, a lot of them have never done stand-up. A lot of them are just curious, so they want to learn, or they want to kind of be a fly on the wall. That's why we have a feedback mic in there, where you do like a Zoom show, but it's just with 7 other members of the group. And then you do your jokes, and then you get group supportive feedback on your jokes. So that's been like a safe space for people to try comedy, as well as the Write 10 Club. That's our daily writing club where we get a new word and write a new joke. That's been another safe space for people to test out joke writing, where to begin, how to start, how to do it, and also, most importantly, connect with other people in those communities that are going to support you and make you realize, oh, I'm not alone. And I've had there's been people in that group, Larry, who have posted what you're saying. It's like, I've always wanted to do comedy, but here are all the reasons that I haven't, or here's all the reasons that I can't. And then you just get all this feedback from people who have been where you are, or are still going through that current like inertia of actually taking action. And you realize that you're not alone in feeling that way. And it's actually normal. And if it means you care that you do feel that way, because if you didn't care, you wouldn't think about it. But you've obviously put a lot of thought into it. So if it's something you've been wanting to try, I think you will when the time is right.
Yeah, like going back to the whole excuses thing, like I've made excuses. I've made all kinds of excuses throughout my life, but like when I started this, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And my cousins are just like, just whatever you do, don't stop doing, just keep going. And that's what I've been doing. So, I mean, this has been working out so far. I mean, I'm just gonna, I like the idea of starting something and just continuing.
Yes.
Even if it's at the pace of like a snail, I'm just gonna keep going.
Yep.
Because
it's the game.
Because it's kind of cool, and I'm like, I got like hooked on like podcasts and like all these like these high numbers. I'm like, man, that's been going for like years. Like, oh, I can't even imagine, But
you got to do it. You've got to do it because you enjoy it. Like I mean, I can tell you from personal experience of doing a podcast over 5.5 years. I mean, just more recently, the numbers have started to get to a more of like cool level or whatever. That's after 5.5 years, and we're still not to where I thought. I thought when we interviewed Bo Burnham, I was like, oh, this is it. This is the next level. And then it's like, you know what I mean?
just a little bump.
Just a little bump. And then it keeps going. Like, and that's the game. And that's for with the music or whatever your endeavor is. It's like, you want to make sure you care about it, because for the majority of your pursuit, else is going to care about it. So if it's something you're passionate about and you care about, you want to make sure it's something you're willing to put in that work when the work doesn't seem like it's working.
Yeah, I'm like, it's when I'm researching comics to like reach out to them. Like, it's kind of like when you're on iTunes or something, like fans of this artist also liked, and like I'm doing that on like YouTube and Instagram, and then like, hey, if there's clips, I watch them. Oh, they're funny. Let me message them.
That's how we connected, right? You said when you were looking up.
I sent you a DM, yeah, and I had known, like, I had subscribed to your channel like right after I saw the original Mark Norman interview.
Yeah.
And I've always just, I'm like, oh, I could ask him, and
yeah.
So I was just trying to think of, I was like, I'm not even going to attempt to try to go after somebody like huge. Like, I'm not even going to attempt that.
Thanks, Larry. Jeez.
No.
Jeez Louise. Okay. I'll go after Joel. I mean, he's at home. He's trophy husband. He'll be fine.
No, I didn't. I didn't mean it that way.
I'm just kidding, Larry. It's all good, buddy. I totally know what you're saying. The first so many episodes were just my friends in my scene just to start the podcast. I wasn't reaching out to like a Jeff Foxworthy or something, but I did that just to kind of get comfortable, figure out, because like this is a lot of production you need to figure out. You don't want to be figuring it out with like a Bert Kreischer or something. You want to have it figured out when you get someone like that on here.
And two, like I also kind of like, and I said this on the one I recorded recently, like I kind of like, it's kind of like indie bands and mainstream bands. Like, and I've kind of found like, there's like all these comics like that until I started this, I had like never heard of. And now I'm like just falling in love with left and right. I'm like, there's just, I hope they get as huge as this person one day because they totally deserve it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's so much out there, and I'm not a fan of 95% of the stuff that's on Netflix or or whatever, but that's neither here nor there.
I think it's important to support the up and coming comics. I mean, that's become the slogan of Hot Breath, is cultivating the next generation of great comics. There are so many people now interested in comedy, so many people thinking about comedy or wanting to pursue comedy. So it's giving them a safe space to learn and develop and connect with like-minded comics. When I started 10 years ago, comedy scenes, and they're still not known to be that supportive and collaborative, and they could be competitive. And I just wanted to create a scene that I wish existed when I started, which is just a fun, positive environment for people that are willing to put in the work. It's fun and supportive, but you need to be willing to be writing jokes, to putting out your own content, to pursuing your own, passions and whatever they are, and creating your own success in this game, which is what I've done in producing my own tours, my own comedy special, producing this podcast, and et cetera, is let me just do it myself and just see what happens. And if anything, hopefully someone will see that I self-produced a special and then released it on my website. And then hopefully they will, yes, I can do that too. Maybe why not me? Why couldn't I do that? So that's been the big push, especially this year, has been thinking about like the next generation of comics and what that looks like. So I think, and I appreciate you saying that you're actually enjoying the lesser known comics, because those are going to be the ones that are the known ones. And you can say, I knew them when.
Yeah, somebody else told me that. And I'm just like, it's kind of like, it's back when I was, I still love music, but back when I just discover some indie band that I'd never heard of, and I'd be like, oh, they're really good. And I'd get excited. I'm like, oh, and I'd be like, hey, listen to this band, telling all my friends. It's kind of like the same thing.
Yep, exactly.
And it feels like I'm discovering treasure in a way. Sure. And I was kind of like, when I saw your thing pop up on YouTube, like Jeff Foxworthy, I'm not gonna lie, I went through a Jeff Foxworthy phase when I was younger. I was like, whoa, that's so cool.
And he was like a 4-year process to get on the show. Like, that's something people don't see. They're like, oh, you just DM Jeff and then you got it. It's like, no, that was like started 4 years ago. I planted that seed to get him on the show eventually, so it was an honor and a thrill to get him on the show. And just what I've noticed for like comics at his level, if it is like a Jeff Foxworthy, Cedric the Entertainer, or like Angela Johnson, those have been some of the nicest people that I've interviewed. Like, usually the more successful people have been the nicest. And like Jeff Foxworthy was like apologizing that it took so long to do the interview. And then afterwards he was like, oh, I hope that was okay. And he's like, sorry again that it took so long to, and like someone at his level, same with like Angela Johnson, or, it's like, it's just those people. I think it shows why they're so successful. And it's because they are just so nice and genuine, and they care about comics. They care. Like Roy Wood Jr., our Q&A with him today was going to go 30 minutes. And then I was like, all right, we're running out of time. And he's like, oh, I didn't realize this was all comics in here. He's like, let's keep going type deal. So those types of comics care about other comics, and they care about nurturing that next generation. That the plan is Hot Breath to become that almost incubator for the next generation.
That's awesome. Like, yeah, I definitely respect. I hope that if whenever I meet somebody famous, that they're just super down to earth and just genuine. Like when, for example, like at least for me, the most anybody of any popularity I've ever met, like physically in person, would be Mark. And I saw him at a show at the end of September, and just as down to earth as I thought he'd be.
Incredible. So nice.
And, that's how I hope, and I know this isn't the case, but that's how I hope everyone is. Or at least that's how I'd say it. Like, that's how I would like to be if I were ever famous doing something, or people knew who I was. I'd strive to be as kind and as down to earth like as that.
Exactly. Yeah, he's super nice. And I haven't really come across anyone that was like that much of a diva, or really like left us grateful for. I mean, some people have been more difficult than others, or when it comes to scheduling and time and things like that, been just like a complete nightmare, which I'm very grateful for. And I feel like maybe part of that is also because this for comics by comics in a lot of ways, and comics like helping comics at the end of the day, so I've been very grateful for that so far. This is great.
Is there anything you have to plug, anything coming up?
I mean, if anything, anyone interested in trying comedy or is currently doing comedy, I think the best place to start would be the Hot Breath Facebook group. I mean, if you go on Facebook and search Hot Breath, you'll find our Writers Room Facebook group. Jump in there. There's over 2,000 comics around the world. We do a daily writing club in there that also live streams onto our YouTube channel that's called Hot Breath. Everything is Hot Breath Comedy Network. But that's going to be a great, safe community to start in and really ask questions, get your feet wet, connect with me and other comics around the world. And then from there, you can learn about everything else we have going on, from the workshops and the courses and our membership group and all that. But go join that Facebook group and just start connecting, and just start. If I could say anything, I'm talking to you, Larry. Just start, my friend. So you never know till you try it, and it may be on a Zoom show and you're like, cool, I did it. Check it off the list. You're going to feel so much better about it. And that's all I really have to plug. I'm a comic that loves helping comics, and however I can do that with the YouTube channel or our weekly podcast or the Facebook group, that's what I'm here to do.
All right. Well, have a great day. Thanks again.
Thanks, Larry.
All right. Bye.
See ya.
Please follow the podcast on all social media at Life's a Bit Pod. If you're listening, please rate and write a review. If you're watching, please like, comment, and subscribe. New episodes every Friday. And remember, it's okay to laugh.